Okay, let's unpack this. We are kicking off the new year with a really high-stakes, hyper-focused deep dive. We're looking at the political landscape of Antigua and Barbuda. And our source material today, it's not some dry policy document. It's essentially a political report card for 2025 and, well, an early manifesto for 2026.
That's right. It's all delivered through the New Year's message from the opposition leader, Jamale Pringle. And this address, it goes so far beyond just seasonal greetings.
Right.
It's a very detailed, almost clinical critique of the incumbent Gaston Browne administration. It really serves as a comprehensive review of where the opposition believes the government failed the nation in 2025.
And it's not just looking back.
No, not at all. Crucially, it also outlines the specific priorities that the United Progressive Party, the UPP, is preparing to champion. They are clearly, signaling their early preparations for the next general election.
So our mission today is really to filter out the rhetorical flourish and just extract the essential nuggets of knowledge from this address. We're looking at where the political friction points are deepest, what their proposed policy platform actually entails, and how the opposition plans to leverage current crises to forge a path to power.
And if you're thinking, why dedicate a whole deep dive to a political speech from one Caribbean nation?
Yeah, why should our listeners care?
It's because the dynamics at play here, they resonate globally. This dive touches on two massive international pressure points. First, the management of economic citizenship by investment programs, the CIPs, which are under intense global scrutiny.
Okay.
And second, consequential international diplomacy, specifically concerning the partial suspension of U.S. visas.
Which is a huge deal.
A huge deal. So
Yeah.
Understanding these specific high-stakes dynamics provides, I think, really crucial context for stability and governance across the entire Caribbean region.
So where do we start?
Let's start with that immediate hard look back at the past year that Pringle presented.
Right. So Pringle started his address not with high-level policy, but with the lived experience of the Antiguan and Barbudan citizen in 2025. His core claim was immediate and, I think, very relatable, that many people experience significant financial strain throughout the year. When an opposition leader leads with that, they're trying to root the political argument directly in the struggle of everyday household budgets.
It's a very calculated move. It prioritizes what we often call kitchen table issues.
Exactly.
He's not just discussing abstract macroeconomic data, he's citing specific, tangible stressors that affect quality of life. The first, and maybe the most familiar globally, was the rising cost of living.
Which everyone is feeling everywhere.
Absolutely. But while inflation is certainly a worldwide phenomenon, Pringle frames it as an internal failure of governance to mitigate that global pressure.
Okay, that distinction is really key. When you're dealing with global inflation, how exactly does an opposition leader claim that it's an internal failure of the government to mitigate it? What tools are available that Pringle is suggesting the Browne administration failed to use?
Oh, that's a really probing question, and it gets to the heart of economic governance, especially in import-dependent island states. Pringle is likely referring to several direct mechanisms the government could employ.
Such as?
For instance, temporary measures, things like lowering or even waiving the customs duties and consumption taxes on essential imported goods.
So on things like staple foods, medical supplies, fuel.
Precisely. By reducing those specific governmental levies, they can immediately reduce the retail price. It buffers citizens from those international price spikes.
So in Pringle's view, not taking that action is a choice.
It's a choice to prioritize tax revenue over citizen relief. And that's how you turn a global problem into what he frames as a local policy failure.
So the argument is that the government had the ability to put its thumb on the scale to ease the financial pain, but it chose not to. That is a direct accusation of misplaced priorities.
Absolutely. And he doesn't stop there. He pairs that cost of living issue with an even more critical infrastructure failure, the inconsistent water supply.
Right.
For an island nation, water security is just fundamental. So the failure of consistent, reliable water immediately transforms from an inconvenience into a critical public health and economic crisis.
And you have to think about the practical effects of that. Inconsistent water supply, it hits sanitation first, which impacts public health, disease control.
Sure.
It hits small businesses, especially in tourism and hospitality, which completely rely on dependable infrastructure. And, crucially, it just impacts the basic operation of every single home. It's a very potent symbol for a failing system that Pringle is using here.
It is the easiest, most visible symbol of a breakdown in basic public service delivery. So Pringle uses this infrastructure failure, paired with the rising prices, to conduct an overall vibe check on the year.
A vibe check. I like that.
And he characterized it by what he called declining public trust in governance. It makes perfect sense. When the government cannot guarantee the most fundamental utility water or help stabilize the cost of food, the public's faith in its competence naturally, crumbles.
So that foundation is set. Citizens struggled in 2025 due to high costs and poor services. Now, Pringle transitions from that general hardship to direct fault, setting up his central accusation.
Yes, this is where the analysis deepens. It moves from just lamenting economic headwinds to laying direct blame. The central accusation Pringle leveled was one of mismanagement and corruption, and it was aimed squarely at the Gaston Browne administration.
So this is not just saying they failed to fix problems.
No. It's alleging they caused them, or at least actively diverted resources away from the solutions.
He argues that the national resources were available, but that those resources have, and this is the key part, not been reflected in crucial areas of improvement for the public good.
And he didn't leave that vague. He didn't just throw the accusation out there. He provided a pretty damning checklist of sectors where he says progress was demonstrably lacking.
I was on that list.
He cited infrastructure first, which of course covers everything from reliable utility networks like the water supply to basic road maintenance.
Okay.
Then he moved to healthcare, suggesting inadequate public services necessary for health, which is a critical vulnerability, especially in the wake of global pandemics where robust healthcare systems are just paramount.
He also focused on the long-term economic vulnerability of island nations by citing a lack of progress in food security. That reliance on imports makes the rising cost of living, which he mentioned earlier, even more volatile and dangerous.
Precisely. Food security isn't just about farming, it's about national resilience. A lack of domestic food production means the nation is highly exposed to every shipping bottleneck, every global conflict, every currency fluctuation.
So the opposition is saying, you should have invested resources here to stabilize our future, and you didn't.
Exactly. And finally, he connected this whole pattern of failure to societal stability itself. Crime prevention. A failure to show progress in reducing violent crime speaks to deep systemic instability.
And that feeds directly into that declining public trust he identified at the very beginning. It all ties together.
It does. But what's truly effective about Pringle's strategy here is the political framing. He is stating that these issues, poor infrastructure, inadequate healthcare, persistent crime, are fundamentally solvable.
Solvable through what?
Through better governance, through accountability, and through the proper deployment of national resources.
So in effect, he's saying the problems are not the fault of the world economy or just bad luck.
No.
They're the result of bad choices made in St. John's.
Exactly. If the resources exist, and Pringle asserts they do, but the public services suffer, then the logical conclusion the voter is encouraged to draw is that those resources are either being criminally wasted or, worse, diverted through corruption. This narrative powerfully sets up the UPP's future platform as the party of competent, honest management, which contrasts directly with the alleged moral and managerial failures of the incumbent administration.
That financial critique leads us pretty seamlessly into Section 2, where Pringle moves from that general economic mismanagement to citing specific high-profile incidents. These serve as a kind of narrative evidence to support his claim that the government's priorities are fundamentally flawed.
And these specific anecdotes are the hooks that grab a voter's attention. They create memorable examples of this stark contrast between what the government is preoccupied with and what the public is suffering through.
They crystallize the idea of a disconnected ruling class.
That's the goal.
The first specific controversy Pringle cited, and is one that's now kind of infamous in the local press, was Vehiclegate. Now, we don't have every single legal detail in front of us, but the name alone suggests a scandal involving the questionable importation or tax treatment or regulatory approval of luxury vehicles. Pringle explicitly referenced this, using it as a prime example of contrasting priorities.
It's highly symbolic. I mean, why is national effort and presumably political capital and governmental focus being spent on allegedly facilitating the importation of high-end luxury goods, maybe with regulatory corners cut, when the very infrastructure needed for basic life, like consistent water, is failing?
It's a powerful image. It visually pits extravagance at the top against austerity and suffering at the bottom.
It does.
Well, let me play the devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't a government simply obligated to process all import applications, even for luxury goods? Where's the political choice element in that, and why does Pringle use it as evidence of corruption?
That's a necessary challenge to the narrative. And the political choice Pringle is highlighting often lies not in the mere existence of the application, but in the alleged speed or the secrecy or the special regulatory treatment afforded to these specific luxury imports.
So things like tax waivers or expedited customs processing.
Exactly. Treatment that is allegedly not available to the general public or to small businesses struggling to import basic supplies. So if the system is seen as being manipulated to benefit a connected few, while the ordinary citizen waits months for basic infrastructure repairs, it becomes evidence of systemic corruption, not just standard bureaucracy.
That makes sense. It's the perceived unfairness and the prioritization that makes it so politically potent. The other major saga he referenced, which has truly captured international attention, was the Alfa Nero case.
Oh, yes.
This is, of course, the continued legal fallout involving the sale and disposal of that sanctioned superyacht.
The Alfa Nero case is a major distraction point. It involves millions upon millions of dollars, complex international sanctions, multiple claimants, and deep, distracting legal wrangling. Pringle links the government's preoccupation with this high-profile, high-value asset to the wider narrative of questionable activity and, again, governmental focus on matters that benefit or preoccupy only the highest echelons of society.
Right, rather than improving the roads or healthcare for the common citizen. And what's absolutely essential here is how Pringle connects these two incidents. He explicitly stated that these high-profile controversies, Vehicle-Gate and the Alfa Nero case, contrasted sharply with the lack of progress on critical public safety issues.
And that contrast is the political thesis of the entire critique. It suggests a government that is looking up at superyachts and luxury imports when it should be looking down at the needs of its people.
So let's look at those serious foundational problems he highlighted. The persistent lack of progress on unresolved violent crime, and equally disturbingly, continuing missing persons cases. I mean, these are tragedies that cause genuine, deep-seated fear and instability within the community. They undermine the very fabric of social cohesion.
And when major, ongoing, unresolved social tragedies like these persist, while the government is allegedly consumed by high-end vehicle disputes or complex international litigation over a billionaire's yacht,
then the opposition's argument that priorities are deeply misplaced becomes virtually irresistible to a public that's already feeling the pinch of financial strain.
Exactly. It paints a definitive picture of a disconnect between the rulers and the ruled.
But Pringle didn't stop there. He moved beyond general political criticism to introduce something more personal.
Yes, he introduced personalized allegations of political intimidation and victimization.
And these claims, they raise the stakes significantly.
They do, because they question the integrity of the democratic process itself. Pringle alleged direct political victimization targeting his own family's business. He claimed a specific incident occurred where a tent belonging to his family's business in the Old Road area was demolished.
And the alleged mechanism used for this political pressure, the Development Control Authority, the DCA. For an international listener, we need to understand what the DCA is and why its alleged use in this context is so politically charged.
The DCA is the powerful statutory body responsible for regulating all physical development. So building permits, zoning, structures, land use. In small island states where land and development are often the most valuable and the most contentious resources, the DCA wields immense authority.
So to claim that the DCA, which has the power to demolish property and issue stop orders, is being weaponized against political dissent,
is to claim that the state itself is using regulatory power for retribution.
And Pringle linked this demolition directly to his political action, claiming it occurred after he publicly criticized government policies.
The timing, if true, suggests a motive of political retaliation.
It creates the appearance of selective enforcement.
Exactly, where regulatory rules are strictly and immediately applied to political adversaries, while perhaps being overlooked for allies. This suggests a deeply aggressive use of state apparatus to silence the opposition.
And he didn't stop with the DCA.
No, he didn't. Pringle further claims that police action taken against him specifically on Boxing Day, a major public holiday, was yet another attempt to intimidate the opposition.
To make an arrest or take action against a prominent opposition figure on a holiday, if it's intended to be seen as intimidation, it suggests a desire to maximize public visibility and disruption.
Precisely. It sends a message: criticize us, and the full weight of the state, the Development Control Authority, the police will come down on you wherever you are and whenever you speak up.
Now, we have to maintain our commitment to impartial reporting here.
Of course.
Pringle made these claims of intimidation, which are central to the UPP's narrative. but we must acknowledge that the government has previously denied this specific claim of intimidation.
That balance is absolutely crucial. However, we also have to analyze the political function of the claim itself. Regardless of the judicial outcome, the assertion that the government is autocratic, corrupt, and willing to suppress dissent through official channels serves a clear political purpose.
Which is?
It reinforces the UPP's narrative that they are the courageous underdogs, the martyrs fighting against an entrenched, aggressive, and morally compromised power structure.
And by doing that, it frames the next election as a contest for democracy itself, not just about policy.
Exactly. That significantly raises the stakes, moving the conflict from typical policy debates to one about fundamental democratic integrity.
Let's shift now to the immediate, tangible international crisis Pringle focused on: the partial suspension of U.S. visa issuance. This is a crucial element because it directly connects high-level diplomacy to the personal mobility, economic opportunities, and future prospects of Antiguan and Barbudan citizens.
It's a real-world, immediate consequence that, for Pringle, validates his entire critique of government mismanagement. It affects the ability of citizens to travel, to study, to work abroad in one of the most important global jurisdictions.
The facts Pringle presented are pretty stark. The partial suspension took effect on January 1st, coinciding with the very start of the year and his address.
And the consequence is highly practical. It affects Antiguans and Barbudans seeking new visas in certain categories. This isn't a theoretical warning. It's a new active hurdle that people are facing right now.
And Pringle held nothing back on accountability here, did he?
No, he accused the Gaston Browne government of mishandling diplomatic relations that directly contributed to this consequential decision by the United States.
So from the U.S. side, what are the likely security concerns that would trigger such a diplomatic freeze? And why would Pringle lay the blame directly at the administration's feet?
Well, the finger of blame points squarely at the integrity of the Citizenship by Investment program, which we'll get into more detail on later.
The CIP.
Right. The U.S. places immense sensitivity on security and vetting processes, especially when a nation offers fast-track citizenship. A visa suspension often signals a failure to adhere to agreed-upon security protocols regarding information sharing, due diligence on applicants, or tracking certain classes of citizens.
So when the U.S. or the EU perceives a security loophole in a CIP,
meaning undesirable individuals could be purchasing passports,
they use visa restriction or suspension as a primary diplomatic tool to force compliance.
That's it.
This accusation of mishandling implies active negligence.
Are we talking about specific types of visas being suspended? For global listener, what's the practical impact here? Well, it's a partial suspension, which means it typically targets non-immigrant visas where the U.S. perceives the highest security risk or potential for abuse. For instance, the B1, B2 tourist and business visas are crucial for short-term travel. A suspension there limits casual travel, business, family visits.
But it can be more critical than that.
Oh, yes. Suspensions can target investor visas, like the E2 Treaty Investor Visa, which allows citizens of treaty countries to reside in the U.S. for investment purposes. If the CIP is the source of the diplomatic friction, the U.S. is likely signaling that they no longer trust the vetting of the very individuals the country is naturalizing.
That's a massive economic and social blow. It connects the alleged lax standards of the CIP directly to the global mobility of every single citizen.
It absolutely does. And this diplomatic headache is compounded by the conflicting assurances coming from the governing side.
Right. Pringle referenced Prime Minister Gaston Browne's position,
which was one of damage control. Browne stressed that existing U.S. visas remain valid and that, discussions are ongoing with U.S. authorities to resolve the issue.
Which is the typical government response in a crisis. Assure the public that it's being managed at the highest levels.
Of course. But Pringle countered that assurance forcefully.
How so?
His counter-argument was pragmatic and focused entirely on the immediate reality for the populace. Pringle stated clearly that the situation has not changed for those seeking new visas. He argued that the government's assurances of ongoing discussions have not yet produced any tangible results.
And that distinction between existing validity and new application hurdles is precisely what matters most to people on the ground.
Yes. While it's comforting that existing visas are safe, the inability for new students or workers or business owners to secure essential travel documents impacts future education, future commerce, future family unity. That opposition is essentially saying, don't be swayed by vague promises. Look at the concrete fact that new doors of opportunity vital for the nation's growth have been slammed shut, and the government is responsible for that diplomatic breakdown.
So the partial visa suspension serves as powerful political proof for Pringle's wider narrative of government failure. It connects alleged internal corruption and mismanagement to undeniable, real-world international consequences.
It does. It undermines the government's ability to protect its citizens' global mobility and reputation.
And this isn't a unique situation, is it?
No, not at all. Other Caribbean nations with CIPs, like Vanuatu or Dominica, have faced similar geopolitical pressures. This demonstrates that the issue really transcends local politics and is part of a global response to perceived security gaps in the economic citizenship industry. For Pringle, this incident is the ultimate piece of evidence. The government's greed or lax oversight has tangible negative consequences for every single person carrying an Antiguan passport.
We've established Pringle's very comprehensive and I'd say blistering critique of 2025. Now we have to turn to the constructive alternative. What is the UPP's proposed platform for 2026 and beyond? This transition is so politically crucial as criticism must always be balanced with a believable alternative.
And the core of that alternative platform, and really the highest stakes policy discussion, concerns the Citizenship by Investment program, the CIP.
Right. The very program we were just saying is likely at the heart of the visa issue.
It is the financial backbone for many Caribbean nations. And for Antigua and Barbuda, it is the absolute financial linchpin. Pringle acknowledged this dependency. He noted, quite frankly, that government finances have become increasingly dependent on revenues generated from the CIP.
That admission is important.
It's the necessary starting point for any discussion about reform because it establishes the immense risk involved in even touching the program.
The UPP commitment is clearly stated. A future UPP administration would commit to a comprehensive review of the CIP.
Yeah.
Now, this sounds like sensible governance, but given that dependency you just mentioned, a comprehensive review means potentially challenging the funding source that covers a massive portion of the nation's operating expenses. What exactly does that entail in this context?
It's the political equivalent of open heart surgery. A comprehensive review goes far beyond a simple audit. It would involve several key components.
Okay, let's break that down.
First, a rigorous external review of the due diligence process. Are the agencies responsible for vetting applicants doing so robustly enough to satisfy international partners?
Right.
Second, an analysis of the program's pricing and investment thresholds. Are they too low, making the passport seem cheap and therefore high risk in the eyes of the US and EU?
And a third.
A move toward radical transparency. Publishing data on application volumes, denial rates, and, crucially, where the revenue is being allocated. This is done to regain international confidence, but it requires a lot of political bravery because it risks alienating current revenue streams who prefer the status quo.
Pringle clearly outlined the need for expert and stakeholder consultation to determine if the program's financial benefits continue to outweigh its non-financial risks. He detailed 2 specific threats he identified that necessitate this drastic review. Let's start with the growing international scrutiny.
That scrutiny is the direct cause of the visa issues we just discussed. The international community, particularly the United States and the European Union, views poorly managed CIPs as a severe security threat. They worry that money launderers, sanctioned individuals, and those avoiding criminal prosecution can effectively buy global mobility and visa-free travel.
So the U.S. visa suspension is simply the most immediate, localized evidence of that scrutiny.
Exactly. Pringle is signaling that the UPP understands that failure to manage this scrutiny means losing access to major economic partners. It's an existential threat.
And the second threat Pringle cited was the direct issue of reputational risks. How does this manifest economically beyond simply, embarrassing the country on the world stage?
Reputational risk is lethal because it causes institutional systemic damage. The most immediate and dangerous threat is de-risking by correspondent banks.
Unpack that for us. What is de-risking?
Okay, so Caribbean economies depend entirely on correspondent banks. These are usually large U.S. or European financial institutions to process international transactions, settle foreign exchange, and conduct trade. If those banks deem Antigua and Barbuda's CIP to be too high risk, that is, too likely to involve illicit finance, they may unilaterally close or severely restrict the accounts of Antiguan banks.
And the effect of that would be?
Catastrophic. This de-risking makes it almost impossible for anyone, businesses, citizens, or even the government to transact internationally. It would effectively cripple the economy.
That's a terrifying scenario. So Pringle is suggesting that the long-term existence of the current CIP structure poses an existential threat to the entire financial system, not just a diplomatic inconvenience.
Precisely. The UPP is arguing that the current administration has allowed short-term CIP revenue to completely overshadow this long-term, potentially catastrophic reputational health of the nation. The commitment to a review is an attempt to signal to critical international partners, the US, the EU, the correspondent banks, that a UPP government would take these security threats with the seriousness they demand.
This review, then, is an incredibly complex political tightrope walk.
It is.
They have to reform the program enough to satisfy the international community, but not so much that they immediately collapse the national budget.
That is the immense political difficulty they would face. If they tighten the due diligence, applications may drop. If they raise the price, they might become less competitive. They are promising to solve a long-term problem while managing an immediate, massive fiscal dependency.
Beyond this critical CIP policy, Pringle also articulated the broader philosophical underpinning of the UPP's future governance model.
Yes, and that philosophy is packaged under the UPP motto, People First Governance.
Which is a clear rhetorical pivot.
It's a direct contrast to the alleged corruption, mismanagement, and misplaced priorities, like Vehiclegate, that he detailed earlier in the address. The implicit promise is that a UPP administration will shift resources away from luxury scandals and toward the essentials.
Fixing the water supply, improving healthcare, investing in food security, and effective crime prevention. The things he said were being ignored.
All of those things.
Importantly, Pringle's message served as more than just a philosophical declaration. It was also a formal organizational step, indicating the start of the election cycle acceleration.
It was a very practical, concrete political move. The address included the announcement of a slate of constituency caretakers for the UPP.
And what does that signal?
In any parliamentary system, naming caretakers means you are filling in your electoral map and actively building your ground campaign structure. This formally signals an early campaign posture ahead of the next general election. It tells the public, we are ready and we are organized.
And he coupled that organizational movement with a very direct, actionable call for engagement aimed right at the citizens themselves.
Yes, the address included a specific instruction for citizens to update or register their voter identification cards.
This is a crucial element of the strategy.
It is. It links the future platform and the promise of people-first governance directly to the necessary democratic action required to make that change possible. The message is simple and powerful. We have the comprehensive plan for reform. Now ensure you have the means to vote for it. It is a pragmatic, grassroots mobilization strategy built right into the core policy announcement.
That's a strong way to transition to the conclusion, shifting the responsibility for the change back to the electorate where the power legally resides.
Yeah.
So this deep dive into Jamale Pringle's New Year's message has provided a pretty comprehensive look at the opposition's multi-layered strategy. I think we can synthesize the dive into two core opposing elements. On one side, we have this highly detailed condemnation of the previous year. It centered on tangible citizen suffering, rising costs, critical water inconsistency, and it's juxtaposed with specific controversies like the symbolic Vehiclegate and those serious claims of political victimization via state agencies like the DCA.
And on the other side, that sharp critique is contrasted with a forward-looking policy agenda that's focused on fundamental systemic change. The commitment to a comprehensive review of the CIP is meant to manage existential international scrutiny and financial risks like de-risking, and it's coupled with a renewed focus on delivering basic, reliable, people-first governance.
And despite the sharpness and the very serious nature of his allegations, Pringle strategically framed his concluding message as one of hope. It was a message of national opportunity, calling for national unity and public engagement. The goal seems to be to leave the listener energized by the potential for democratic change, rather than depressed by the state of affairs he just detailed.
And that energy is channeled toward the ballot box. The final emphasis is on Pringle's powerful assertion that 2026 presents a clear opportunity for change through democratic participation and what he called renewed civic responsibility. It's an effective call to arms, suggesting that the power to fix the economic woes, the corruption issues, and the diplomatic failures lies directly in the hands of the voter.
It's a compelling narrative of failure redeemed by future democratic action. But this brings us back to the biggest tension that Pringle raised himself. The overwhelming, and acknowledged dependency on the CIP as a revenue source.
And this is the final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Pringle pointed out that government finances are increasingly dependent on the CIP. This means that while a UPP administration must commit to a comprehensive review to reduce the international reputational risks, the risk of de-risking and blacklisting, they are simultaneously inheriting a potentially massive fiscal hole if that necessary review leads to significant tightening or a reduction in revenue flow.
So the question is,
what unstated challenges might a UPP administration face in genuinely reducing the CIP's security and reputational risk without simultaneously risking national fiscal stability? Could it potentially force them into unpopular cuts on the very services like healthcare and water infrastructure they promise to improve?
so solution to one problem could create another.
Exactly. This inherent tension between long-term geopolitical necessity and short-term fiscal survival is the deeper systemic question sparked by this powerful opposition address, and it will define their governance if they win.